This is the 21.5 Show.
You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Whether you're a professional pilot or want to be one, you're in the right place.
Let's get started.
Join professional aviators Dylan and Max as they talk their experience in the airlines, business aviation, and more.
Life is good.
Industry experts, unique stories, and plenty of fun. This is the 21.5 Show.
Here we go.
City to city, coast to coast, and around the world, it is the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. This is Dylan. Hello. I am joined by my co-host, brother-in-law, and mentor.
Hi there.
Maxwell. Hello. Joining us from, I'm just going to look, I'm just judging by the video, I'm going to call Hampton Inn.
No, actually, this is a Holiday Inn. Even better.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay. Love the drapes.
Coming to you live from Sacramento.
Okay.
I've only been harassed by 2 homeless people today.
Okay.
One guy asked me to buy him a cup of coffee when I was walking out of the coffee shop. I'm like, bro, you're too late. You got to hit people up going into the coffee shop. That's what I told him. He's like, oh, man.
But did the other guy ask you when you guys are getting in contract?
That's the question, my friend.
That's the question, bro. We're all asking. It's been an exciting week of aviation. Max is again flying PMs. It was funny. Someone sent us the aviation license plates, that we post on Instagram. And one of them just said jet lagged. And I was like, that'd be perfect for you, I think. Just your PM license
I'm starting to get better. I'm starting to train myself to be able to sleep in a little bit in the morning.
Are you?
Yeah, it's great because of all this weather. Right now is when that tropical storm is going to hit Southern California, and Vegas is getting hammered, which affected you today. And so my schedule, all my stuff canceled. I'll just have a deadhead and then fly this late flight back from Seattle. It gets in at like midnight. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I do this? But luckily, now that it changes, the only place I can take a nap is in the back of an airplane. I don't know why. Like I could be so tired, hotel room, pitch black, afternoon, can't sleep. Put me in the back of an airplane, I'm out before we even take off. Literally.
Okay, so here's what you should do. You should take your cell phone and, the voice memo, record like a couple minutes of the ambient audio of that.
It's not that.
You don't think so?
I don't know. No, I don't know what it is.
That incredibly comfortable seat, the pitch of the seat.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's the warm body right next to you that you're in physical contact with the whole time. And, stuffiness of the cabin in the summer. It just really lulls me right to sleep.
Just perfect. Yeah. It's funny. I was the opposite. I could really never sleep in the back of an airplane. And as a commuter, I would say that was a big red flag. So look, if you're going to commute, you better be able to sleep on a plane.
That is the key to mastering the airline job, is controlling your sleep. I've determined, because if you fly the really early stuff, you have to be able to force yourself to go to bed super early. That's why it's a real thing. If you listen to Matthew Walker at all, who's like the foremost authority on sleep, he's wrote a great book, Why We Sleep. He's the guy. If you ever want to learn about sleep, and it will scare you into figuring out your sleep, because you will realize how important sleep is. Remember, I used to say sleep's for the weak.
Yeah.
Sleep's not for the weak. You have to be able to sleep or bad things will happen. We'll just say that. So, and it's true. People are morning people, and there are night owls. That is a true thing. It is an uphill battle trying to fight that if you're, trying to go the opposite of who you are. So I can go to bed at 7:30 local time if I have to, but I cannot sleep in until 9 o'clock to save my life. It is what it is.
It is what it is. But yeah, I think it is true, like knowing yourself a little bit I wonder if at some point you would, like a career coach, I wonder if James or any of those career coach guys should start doing a sleep evaluation early on in your career, and then they'll recommend to you
Well, but that's the thing. Ultimately, you're going to have to tough it out and swim upstream at some point. Fly red eyes if your airline does that. But either way, the good news is there's always light at the end of the tunnel with seniority, as with everything. Life improves.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, you want to go to the lake on Sunday, and so this is the only way you can make it work. So here you are at a PM,
Yeah.
We all make choices.
That's right.
It's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
That is right. Well, I think most of our listeners have been put to sleep by this conversation. So mission accomplished.
Just like this first email we got about how some people prefer to hear about the real life ins and outs and dynamics and schedules and home life. Why don't you just read that real quick for everyone?
Okay. We're talking about the reviews. Yes. Okay. First review came in on Apple Podcasts from Mike Bravo H-Town. Great podcast for aspiring professional pilots, too. Don't be turned off by the intro by professional pilots for professional pilots. This podcast is great for aspiring pilots, too. Dylan and Max are entertaining and knowledgeable hosts that bring great content to the show. I'm a 40-year-old private pilot slogging my way through training and contemplating a mid-career move to fly professionally. I especially enjoy the episodes that discuss the non-flying parts of the job, the family dynamics, the schedules, home lives, sleep.
How about that?
The real world, no holds barred discussions are much better than the puppies and unicorn version of the job you see on social media. That's 5 stars. Thank you, Mike. Shoot us an email and I'll send you a sticker for that.
Yes. Listen, things aren't all roses like the violin playing airline pilot likes to portray on Instagram.
Exactly.
Not everybody's here entertaining the passengers in the terminal with their musical prowess.
Some of us are tossing and turning in a Holiday Inn in Sacramento, trying to avoid buying people cups of coffee. And we also got a YouTube comment. You know, it's amazing, Max. One of the first videos we ever did was that review of the AeroCoast cooler. That video has gotten just tons and tons of views on YouTube, and we get comments all the time. Our buddy Furloughed again just dropped us a comment and said, needs a keyring clip and maybe a good spot to stash the sunshades. Do you have any comments on that?
Maybe we didn't do a good enough job, because I'm pretty sure that there is a place to stash the sunshades on the top of that cooler on the lid of it. Is a little, half zip deal for the sunshades. So
okay. So you're still using it, right?
I'm not. I've been transitioning around between different bags. My storage needs increased recently. And so, like I told you, the AeroCoast barely fits everything. But if you want to just take one other bag and utilize a cooler, it's the best you're going to do. I had to clip my headset to the outside of it, though. There's no way the headset was going to fit. It's just not going to happen. Now I've had to carry more stuff, and now I got this hot bento box, I got to find somewhere for that. It's a whole nother thing. So
you're back to 3 bags? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm back to, in the fact that if you're not on reserve or you don't commute, if I commuted, I don't think, there's no way you could do 3 bags. That's such a pain when you're in the back of the plane. It's a pain when you're in the front of the plane.
Right.
But like today, I have to go deadhead ends, but I don't know. I guess it's not that big of a deal. So yes, I'm back to 3 bags, but I did torpedo that horrendous Luggage Works suitcase that weighs 900 pounds, the tank of suitcases. I'm done with it. There's got to be people that don't work out much that have torn their rotator cuffs with that thing, trying to get it into the overhead or taking out some old. I mean, you could kill somebody with that thing. It's unbelievable.
Okay, save this. Okay, you're getting a good setup
No,
here.
I can't. I'm too worked up.
Okay, so we should mention right now that we are working on a rollaboard suitcase review coming up. The Luggage Works that Max just mentioned, we will both talk about as we've both used it extensively. And then we have a few other bags that we're going to be reviewing. If there is a specific suitcase that you would like us to take a look at, let us know. info@215podcast.com. We'll add it on the list. Right now, you've got the Vortex you're testing right now, I think, right?
Yeah, I have that one. AeroCoast had this really cool one I was really excited about. Had this aluminum external flame, and then it's discontinued. It's not on the roads anymore. So I'm really bummed about that. I saw some flights in it that had too. I was really jealous. But what else are we doing? Briggs & Riley.
I've got a Briggs & Riley. And if there's are any other ones that you'd like us to review, let us know quickly, and we'll get it on the list. And then we're going to have a little something out before the end of the year. That way you can put it on your Christmas list. If our official recommended one, which will not be the Luggage Works. Spoiler alert.
I'm testing one right now, and my work life has improved substantially since I've moved to this other suitcase.
Unbelievable.
It's like you always say with your cell phone. Don't be cheap about the one thing you use the most in life. I mean,
exactly.
Your rollerboard is for your pilot, especially an airline pilot. It's close second.
Exactly. Okay. Those are the reviews and comments. We appreciate folks sending those in. Always helps the show if you can contribute a little bit on YouTube or Apple, wherever. Shoot us an email with your mailing address. This is the key. Everyone writes us an email and says, I left that comment. Great. But then you got to include the mailing address so we can send you the sticker.
I'm waiting to one day I just see somebody organically with one of those stickers we've spent all of that postage to send out.
Yeah.
Like in the airport or on their bag or something.
Oh, it's going to happen. It will happen. So, yeah. Thank you for those reviews. Let's jump into the mailbag, which is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy. You can check out their website, aircrewacademy.com, to see all of the offerings they have for professional pilots, especially those in business aviation training courses. Maybe you need to brush up on your international procedures. Maybe you need to check out their runway excursion course. Maybe you need to get your 135 training accomplished. Whatever your needs are, visit aircrewacademy.com and see what they've got for you. On to the mailbag. Max, go ahead.
Okay, now I have to know. Was Joel the guy doing pushback for us in Vegas last night? If not, he's got a very convincing voice double working the ramp. Mark. No. The answer to your question is no, Mark. Joel was still safely dreaming of PC-12s in Ohio, I'm sure. But I've never heard of Joel. I've been on the Vegas ramp frequency a lot of times. I've never heard a Joel voice double, but
could happen.
Or maybe it's different ramp. It could be a different ramp.
It'd be a different ramp. I can guarantee he's not working the ramp tower. And unfortunately, we have to announce he's no longer working on our tower either. Joel has received a big promotion at work and has had to focus all of his energies into the agricultural broadcasting world.
As all the airline executives do, and spend more time with their family.
Yeah.
when they transition roles.
That's right. So we wish Joel the best of luck in his new endeavors, and we're sad to see him go. And I really hope the next producer we have has just as thick a skin as he does, because Joel was a really good sport when you hassled him pretty much nonstop.
Good sport. There's a lot of meat on the bone. It was we had a lot of fun. Joel, you'll be missed. I'm sure some of the Joel haters that say he sounds like Quagmire, right?
Yeah, that's right. We'll check in with him at some point. Thank you for everything you've done for us, Joel. All right, on to the next email. I own a plane and I'm trying to get my son 1,200 hours so I can get him out of my house. What's stopping me from asking for donations to help pay for gas to transport these people in need and give them flights for the life-saving medical attention they need? Please have your people look into this. I would love to start a nonprofit and skim 40% off the top. And that's from Todd, our friend Todd. He says, P.S. Dylan, you are a terrible wake surfer. That is true. That is true.
Yeah, it was funny because he was asking me his question. I go, I don't know, Todd. I said, why don't you write it into the podcast and ask it through the official channels and we'll get you an answer.
Todd is also overseeing the construction of your home. So
yeah, exactly.
There's a lot on the line here.
A lot.
Do we actually have any type of answer?
So I did do a little bit of research on Angel Flight's website, and I couldn't find anywhere that says that as the pilot, you must donate your airplane, which it sounds like he doesn't have a problem with. But it's the fact that you have to also donate the fuel as a pilot. And so I don't think, and also via my involvement in Sky Kids, there's no option to have anybody else pay for the fuel. Part of volunteering is you paying for the fuel. And I think that comes from a little thing we call Part 91, where you passengers are only allowed to pay the pro rata share. And so I think that's the only reimbursement you could hope to expect flying your own airplane under Part 91. So sorry, Todd. Hate to break it to you.
There's got to be another way to get your son out of the house.
Get an AB fuel credit card and bite the bullet.
I guess. But if you skim the 40% off the top of the nonprofit that could pay for the fuel, I don't know. We'll have to.
Isn't the PGA a nonprofit?
Oh, the NFL is, the PGA. Yeah, there's you can find a way.
No profit in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The NFL's nonprofit too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the sport.
Are you sure? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good deal. We should start it. The 21.5 Foundation.
We should start the Church of 21.5. That's an even better deal.
Oh my gosh. Next email says, hey guys, do you have any more swag? Especially the never take financial advice stickers. My wife never agrees more when I tell her that as I build an RV9. Thanks for the podcast. Makes my drive a wee bit better. That's from TR. Is the RV9, is that the 4-seater?
No, that is a 2-seater.
Okay. That is 2. Okay.
It's like the new version. It's one of their newer versions that a lot of people are building right now.
We have a great video clip of your wife saying, never take financial advice from a pilot while she's sitting in your hangar while you guys are like dropping a fuel tank or something. I should repost that.
Really?
Yeah.
On your phone? You recorded that?
She recorded it and sent it to me. Yeah, it was really funny. I got to dig
that's
that one
right.
up.
I remember it. I was like working on something.
Yeah, you were like doing something. I can't remember.
Just was out there the other day in the 112 degree heat all day. It's awesome.
It's a labor of love. Labor of love. I'll let you read the next email because I feel like you might be able to really validate it.
All right. The perfect vacation is just a sick call away. Number 121, Mike.
Hashtag 121.
Listen, Mike, I'm glad you said it because I was certainly beating around the bush on that one. But again, Mike said it, not me.
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on.
Yeah. Moving on. Okay, I'll talk about it. I can talk about it. I'm not going to get in trouble. I can talk about it. There's definitely different strategery for different ways to get time off, but yeah, it's interesting. Have you heard of California sick?
No.
We had that at American Eagle. That was if you were based in California, they had this additional sick policy for California employees. And so at American Eagle, you could call in California sick. And that was like, it covered like if someone in your family was sick.
Oh, right.
Then you could care for them. So yeah, that was just an added layer of...
But what's the difference?
It was unlimited, or there was no punitive action, or you didn't have to produce a doctor's note or anything. Like it was just like carte blanche.
I don't know. I've never been asked, when you call in sick, I've never been, oh, hold on, let me get a pen and paper now. What symptoms are you experiencing exactly?
Yeah.
And when did you see a physician?
Yeah.
Did you get a note?
Yeah.
And who gets a doctor's note? Like what? It's ridiculous. My dad was a doctor. And when I was a kid and I was in high school, I remember I sniped one of his prescription pads from his desk a long time ago. And I always kept that in case anybody needed a doctor's note. So dumb. Had like everybody, had all 5 doctors in the practice at the top. So you could just circle whoever,
Oh my gosh. You still have that pad?
Listen, the prices got up, inflation.
Yeah.
My friend.
Yeah. It's part of the 21.5 Foundation. That's the basis of, I don't know, we're going to build that out.
It's a nonprofit. Don't worry about
it. That's right. All right. This is a long one, but I think you might enjoy this one. It says, hey guys, with the recent talk about eating at chain restaurants on the road, I had to tell you about the time I took an Aussie to Outback. At a previous 135, we had an influx of Australian pilots come in after COVID. They were all great pilots and fun to fly with, although we quickly learned never to try and outdrink one. I had the chance to fly with one of the first direct entry captains right after he got signed off on IOE. For our 8-day rotation on the road, I had to play tour guide up and down the East Coast since he had only come to the USA just a few days before starting. Company in-doc had spent just a little over a month in the country. Near the end of our rotation, we had an overnight at a hotel with an Outback right next door. He saw the sign and asked if it was any good. I knew I had to let a real Aussie experience what we in the U.S. think is Australian food. As soon as we walked in and sat down, Captain Crocodile Dundee was silent as his jaw hit the ground. As the waitress left with our order, he still hadn't said anything to me. I finally had to ask, so what do you think? I said to him. He proceeded to curse very loudly and slammed his beer on the table and said, "This is racist." As I sunk into my side of the booth, trying not to be noticed, he continued telling me everything that was wrong with the restaurant, how this food isn't what they really eat, how the decor wasn't anything like what the Outback really looked like, and most importantly, how the beer selection didn't have anything to do with Australia. As we walked back to the hotel, I felt as if I had to apologize for making him go through this. I asked how his food was, only to have him say, "I'd go back." I smiled as we finished our rotation. Overall, great pilot, and would sure recommend anyone else take a true Australian to Outback to get their opinion. Keep up the great work, guys, and thanks for making my commute to and from work enjoyable. And that's from Nathan. So good.
That's a bold move. That's like taking somebody right off of from China to Panda Express or something.
Oh, yeah. Just like, all right, here we go, guys. Well, you should know you want, right? Oh, man. That's hilarious. Great. Good one, Nathan.
I don't understand the beer selection, though. They always have Foster's on draft there.
I don't even know. Did they really drink Foster's down there? I wouldn't even think they do. I don't know,
dude. I have no clue. That's hilarious.
We need to investigate that. I'm sure we've got an Australian listener who can write in and tell us what.
I'd go back. Well, apparently the Australians don't hold a grudge either, so it's...
Loves that brown bread with the big knife and you just spread the butter. I mean, listen.
Yeah, what else do you want?
I mean, it's in the parking lot of the Hilton Garden Inn, so I mean...
I was just flying with a dude that was filling in, and he was talking about, the guy, he was a long-term chain with a chain restaurant dude, and they ate at like Chick-fil-A 4 times, and Panda Express, and like all... I'm like, dude...
There's a great Panera bread sandwich I love, Max.
That's got to say something about your personality. Like that you're not willing to accept any risk that like you might have a meal you don't like. So you just go to something that's very consistent and therefore more than likely mediocre because that's how you maintain consistency, right?
I just want to tell you, I introduced my co-star in the cockpit to one of our favorite restaurants, Momofuku, the other day.
Oh, he did.
And we had those steamed pork buns.
Did you get the chilled noodle bowl?
No, it's discontinued, unfortunately. Menu.
No, I knew that. I was baiting you.
So pumped. Anyways, go take a risk.
Old Chang.
Yeah, exactly. Go take a risk.
That's what he's doing.
I have great news for you, Max. We have not one, but 2 emails of flight advice follow-up.
Finally. Thank you.
Which is what you've been asking for. So the people have delivered.
Good.
The first one is from Mark. Back in episode 87, Mark had wrote in for some flight advice. I think it was pretty low time and went into his first 121 training event and unfortunately failed out of it due to, I think, a lot of family issues and some other stuff. I don't think he was able to focus 100% on the training. So he wrote up a follow-up.
Hey guys, I know y'all been asking for updates from folks you give flight advice to, and today's the day for an update. You featured me on episode 87, and I took everything y'all said to heart. Since then, I've applied what I've learned, and with a bit of hard work, I've recently passed my restricted ATP check ride and line check with a regional carrier. It truly takes a village, and now it's time to build that valuable 121 multi-turbine time. I just want to say thank you both for so much of your insight and advice, and to please keep up the amazing work y'all do. Blue skies and tailwinds, Mark. Thank you for making me say y'all so many times too, Mark.
Yes. Good job, Mark.
A phrase
well
I don't
done.
often utilize.
Yeah.
That's
good.
awesome, though. Good. See, now it's just a little speed bump in the rearview mirror. He's on his way.
I learned about flying from that. Well done, Mark.
Someone's a flying magazine reader still.
Right. Well, listen, I just eat it while I'm eating at Chili's. I just bring my flying magazine. It's great. Okay, another one and a good follow-up. And this is actually from the flight advice we just did last episode for the commuter from Wyoming. Remember, we talked extensively about Southwest schedules and et cetera, et cetera. You said, heard the show and appreciate your time. I'm taking the advice and running with it. I just have to get an interview. I'll give you a 6-month update and eat out more than I should so I can provide you with the answer to quite possibly the greatest disappointment in culinary history. Thanks again, Lane. Well, Lane, I think some of the restaurants we've mentioned can be on your hit list, but I'm excited for you to give it a shot there. Good luck getting an interview. Don't ask Max for a letter of recommendation.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that pans out because he's got some interesting roads that he can go down. So,
yeah. Hey, Max, will you write him a letter of recommendation on the doctor's pad note you stole? Would that be better?
Lane has been my patient for many years. He's healthy as a horse. It's great musculature.
That'd be funny if we started doing letters of recommendation from doctors. It's just a very healthy posture. Can sleep really well.
Passes his prostate exam every year without even a hiccup.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay, well, that is the mailbag, of course, brought to you by Advanced Aircrew Academy, aircrewacademy.com. So good. If you want to be on the mailbag, you know what to do. Send us an email, info@215podcast.com, and we'll be happy to share your thoughts. Okay, coming up on the main interview, Max, we are going to be talking takeoff performance, again, with our friend James Deuvall, who is a takeoff performance guru and
a wizard of takeoff performance, would you say?
Yeah. So stick around, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation with Jim. You're going to learn something about takeoff performance, and it's probably something that can affect your flight operation. Let's jump right in. Max, we'd like to welcome back Jim Deuvall. He is the owner and CEO of CAVU Companies and our resident performance guru, who the listeners may remember we've spoken to him several times about aircraft performance. So welcome back to the program, Jim.
Hey, it's glad to be back, Max and Dylan. It's been a long time, actually, since we talked last.
And I'm sure nothing has changed in the aircraft performance world, right? Everything's just static.
Well, you asked me to come up with something that was exciting.
Okay.
And what would you say if I told you that there's a ticking time bomb in general aviation that affects probably 95% of the twin turbojets and 99% of the pilots directly affected are completely unaware?
I would say go on.
My ears have perked up.
All right. Well, several years ago, this was interrupted by COVID, obviously. I was a speaker at a safety stand down at Gulfstream for their demo and test pilots. And after the meeting, I was invited to stay an extra day to attend the wide body owners group, just as a member of the audience, not on any of the forums. There was a Q&A session during this meeting, and the chief pilot of one of the corporations present, big company, everyone would know it if I told you the name, asked when Gulfstream was going to approve runway analysis. Now, let me take a little sidebar here just to explain what he was actually requesting. Under 135 and 121 rules, operators are regulated and required to assure that if they lose an engine, that they can clear obstacles by 35 feet vertically or 300 feet laterally on a net path. Many Part 91 operators also adopt this standards, but they're not required to do so. Now, there are essentially two ways to accomplish this. The first is the time-tested, it's been around forever, method called climb gradient analysis. This method navigates along the path of a published departure procedure like a SID or an ODP or a DP. This procedure has a climb gradient associated with it, and everyone has seen the climb gradients listed in their departure procedures, like 350 feet per nautical mile up to 3,000 feet. But this is an all-engine gradient, and even if you could fly this gradient with one engine in up, it does not guarantee the airplane will clear the obstacles by 35 feet or 300 feet laterally. It doesn't meet the reg. However, the TERP's criteria of creating these departure procedures is constructed, if you will, on top of an obstacle clearance area. It's been surveyed for obstacles, and it's called the obstacle clearance surface, which has its own gradient. But that gradient doesn't take into account close-in obstacles. So if you factor in clearing the close-in obstacles and keep the aircraft net path above this obstacle clearance surface gradient, you'll have a solution. So there's a couple of vendors that do obstacle performance. Falcon Sphere by Deuvall, Gulfstream has one. And of course, EFB Pro is another one that uses this method. And I'll just mention too that the departure procedures, keep in the back of your mind, are actually flight tested. Now, the second method is called runway analysis, and that's what this chief pilot was asking about. And that is described and identified within an advisory circular called 120-91. And I bring that up only, I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you.
Before we move to runway analysis, let me just clarify something. So what you're saying is that the climb gradient that's on a departure procedure does not guarantee obstacle clearance?
It doesn't take into account close-in obstacles. It's designed for all engines operating. So any aircraft that's got all engines operating are going to clear the obstacles, even close-in obstacles, if you look at how they've designed the close-in obstacles and identify those.
Because I think the other thing, too, is a lot of people realize that the departure procedure climb gradients aren't always just for obstacles. There are a lot of times for airspace or other
Correct.
airports with other departing traffic, like out of Oakland, that we have one that's to avoid San Francisco traffic and, just stuff like that. So the airlines in 135, just because you meet the climb gradient on the departure procedure, how do you ensure that you're going to clear the close-in obstacles? And why don't you kind of give everyone a refresher real quick on what the definition of close-in obstacles is?
Right. So close-in obstacles are obstacles that penetrate the 1 to 40 plane for 1 mile beyond the departure of the runway, in very simplistic terms. So those obstacles can penetrate that plane by 35 feet or more. And the FAA has taken the position that to try to create a gradient that goes over the top of those close-in obstacles would just be very highly prohibitive, even for all engines operating. So basically, they leave this first mile where the obstacles would penetrate this plane up to some secondary method like runway analysis or climb gradient analysis to clear.
Okay. So just because the all-engine operating climb gradient doesn't necessarily guarantee you would clear those obstacles, in practical terms, it's not really a concern because you always will. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, aircraft are not going to clear the end of the runway by 35 feet when they have all engines operating, which is where basically those close-in obstacles are. But if you did, let's just say out of curiosity, you were able to clear the obstacle by scraping the paint, if you will, with all engines operating. You wouldn't be hitting the obstacle, but you wouldn't be meeting the intent of 135, 379, or the corresponding regulations under Part 121 that require you to say, if you were to lose an engine, you can clear those obstacles by 35 feet on a net gradient. And the net path that we're talking about, if you recall, is that denatured climb gradient. It's not where the airplane actually is, the aluminum of the airplane, but it's a kind of a denatured safety gradient that they built in some safety margins into so that you will clear the obstacle cleanly by 35 feet. So That's the reg, is that they have to be clearing these obstacles by 35 feet over the top of them or 300 feet laterally.
Okay. And then the method of compliance for that is one, to use EFB Pro, which is your app. Some of the manufacturers have developed their own performance calculating apps, right, to figure this out. And then the other method that we're mostly familiar with would be
runway analysis. Correct. Runway analysis is it's not just willy-nilly. They have an advisory circular that tells them how to actually produce these departure procedures. But the underlying criteria here is that these procedures do not necessarily follow the ODP or the SID, whereas the climb gradient analysis does. But even if it does follow those paths, they're only checking obstacles on a corridor that is 3 to 6 times narrower than the TERPS criteria for identifying obstacles. A corridor, it's only like 2,000 feet wide. So there's a confidence that they can identify essentially all the obstacles and they can be located exactly. And then what they do is, instead of keeping the airplane on a gradient that clears these obstacles, they basically clear the obstacle. I sometimes used to refer to this as just-in-time clearance. They're basically looking at a particular obstacle and make sure they clear that obstacle by 35 feet versus keeping the airplane on a gradient that keeps you above all of the obstacles.
And by clearing that obstacle, is that by basically threading the needle a lot of times and avoiding it laterally because you can't avoid it vertically? Is that the solution?
It's not like you can just take the airplane and move it left and right when you're departing. So it's kind of dependent upon where the obstacle is. They're looking at a corridor, as I said, and if the obstacle is 500 feet to the left or right, then it's not kind of a non-issue. But if the obstacle is closer into the center line, now they got to factor in a way to get over the top of it. You've seen a lot of close-in obstacles listed on departure plates, and sometimes they'll say there's an obstacle that's 100 feet, 6 inches off the end of the runway. Those obstacles really are not there. The FAA takes the position that if the close-in obstacles have not been adequately surveyed by the appropriate people, that they're going to put down a matrix of obstacles of indigenous trees in the area of the departure path. And some of those indigenous trees will be right at the end of the runway. So you'll have, if in very, very typical fashion, you'll have runway analysis saying you have to clear the end of the runway by 135 feet to get 35 feet over that obstacle, which doesn't even exist. And by doing that, what they're doing is they're saying, we're going to reduce the runway length so you become more runway limited. So by the time you get to the DER, even with one engine and up, you're 135 feet instead of 35 feet. So that's kind of how that works. And that's how it can be very, very limiting. All of runway analysis came out of the 121 world, where airlines basically petitioned the government to allow them to produce their own departure procedures. They were dealing with a very unique set of aircraft airframes, a limited number of routes, and they put in place very, very stringent training for their pilots, recertification of which pilots could fly certain escape procedures and so on. And the departure procedures themselves were created by the airlines, so they flight tested them. In today's environment, where you have a product like ABC, I'm just not going to use their name, or any of the other number of them that are out there, these are not flight tested models. They're procedures. They're just simply mathematical models. They've never been flight tested. And in the Advisory Circular 120-91, it explicitly says the operator is responsible for flight testing or assuring that the procedure is flyable, but nobody does. So back to my story. I'm sitting here in the audience listening to this chief pilot ask this director of aviation at Gulfstream. His name was Randy Gaston, by the way, and he's since retired, when they were going to endorse runway analysis. And Randy Gaston got up and he says, we are not going to recommend runway analysis use to our members. He said, we took several members of our demonstration and flight test program. They had the makers of that particular runway analysis program come down and instruct them on how to use it. And then they placed them in a G550 simulator, and they could not fly these procedures without striking terrain or coming dangerously close. And obviously, my jaw almost hit the floor when I heard this. I was stunned. And he continued to say that the makers of the app came back 3 times to tweak the information to see if they could somehow resolve this from occurring, and they could not. So he just said, if we can't fly the procedures, we're not going to endorse the procedures. That was essentially all that was said during that presentation. He did not give a reason for why this was happening. But I did have an opportunity to speak to him on a couple of occasions afterwards. And I questioned him a couple times about what was his criteria for what was a successful maneuvering, if you will, except for the hitting the terrain. Was it like one dot left or right of a deflection of his CDI? And he says, no. He says, we absolutely said that we had to maintain the magenta line or we didn't count the procedure in the test at all. And then I asked, well, out of all the procedures that you tried, how many failed? And he said they could not successfully fly one procedure, not one. So this now really piqued my interest.
They knew the engine failure was coming and they had briefed the alternate procedure. Like they were primed for it and still couldn't fly it, huh?
Yeah, right. And they were on the magenta line the whole time. Wow. This really piqued my interest. Now, Gulfstream did not pursue the reason why this was happening. I don't know why they didn't, but I did. And I traveled all over the country, talked to a lot of pilots, got into a lot of cockpits of a lot of different airplanes, talked to the simulator people. What I found out was this, is that the simulator in Savannah, where they had this G550 simulator, it could realistically simulate EPE. Now, EPE is sometimes referred to as ANP on some FMSs, but visually what EPE is, and you can do this right now as we're speaking, take your Google Maps in your iPhone and you locate yourself and it has the little blue dot that says, here's where you are. And around that blue dot, you'll see a bigger blue circle. And that blue circle will pulsate. Even though you're standing still, it will pulsate bigger and smaller. Bigger and smaller. And that's basically EPE. That's an estimated position error that the GPS is identifying just because of the location of the satellites and so on. But in the aviation, EPE also builds into account what they call total system error, which part of that is the location of the GPSs, but there's other things as well. So that was one thing, is that the simulator at Savannah had the ability to realistically simulate that while they were flying, this EPE would go up and down, whether it be 0.1 or 0.2 or whatever it was. And that number is actually shown on your primary display. If any people have seen that, it's right next to where the RNP is listed. And what I did find is that a lot of the simulator places like Flight Safety and CAE, they have the capability to change their settings so that the EPE is 0 or a very, very small number. And I'll come back to that in just a second because that's important to know. The second thing that I found out was this, that when a pilot manually enters the escape procedure, or really any procedure within 30 miles of the airport, into the vast majority of FMSs, and I'm talking 99% of the FMSs out there, and again, manually entered the escape procedure, not found inside a database that they selected by name, that the FMS will set the RNP to 1. And 95% of the FMSs do not allow you to modify that value. Now, why is that significant? If you're flying one of these Part 121 or 120-91 procedures, the obstacle clearance, as I said, is only 2,000 feet wide. That means if you're on the magenta line and the EPE is magically 0 for some reason, that means that there is no air. Then the obstacles, and in the best case, are only a mere 2,000 feet left or right of your position. So in a sim at Flight Safety where they can adjust this, and I've been in this scenario where guys have said, we've got 30 minutes left on the simulator. What do you want to do? And they say, we want to fly this procedure out of Aspen or whatever it is, using one of these runway analysis procedures. And I can tell you the instructor is going to set it up where the EP is 0, probably, or 0.01 or something, because he just wants you to see if you can maneuver the airplane. So you're on the magenta line, you're physically in that location. There's no uncertainty of what your position is. And I'll say that, they might put it down to 0.01, like you're flying at flight level 300 or something. You're down below the mountaintops now, flying at 120 knots. The EP might be 0.4 or 0.9. If your RNP is 1, you're not even going to get an RNP alert if it's 0.9. Well, let me just put it this way. RNP is actually a statistical value that says that with an RNP of 1, 95% of the time, you will be within that 1 mile ring around your airplane. You'll be within that zone 95% of the time.
Right.
people read 95%. Usually that should toggle some people's minds. That's 2 standard deviations. This is a bell curve distribution. If you look at just a half a standard deviation, which is half of a mile, that's 66% of the time you will be in that area. If you're only talking about 2,000 feet, what's the probability that you're within 2,000 feet of that location? It's less than 49%. So 51% of the time you're outside of the protected area, even though it says you're on the magenta line. So you start to get the problem here. If you're looking at a normal TERPS procedure in a terminal environment with an RNP of 1, you're in the protected area 99.99% of the time, because that protected area is like 2 miles. That's 4 standard deviations from the center line. That's like it's almost impossible for you to be outside of that area. That's why these FMSs default to an RNP of 1 when you manually enter the procedure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know it's a lot to comprehend, but the reality is that the FMSs were set up for terminal environments using FAA procedures or guidance, if you will, of how wide these terrains are. They were never designed for escape procedures.
Right.
I have guys that come from the airline says, we flew escape procedures all the time. We never had a problem with them. Well, number one, airlines, as I mentioned before, they flight tested their procedures. They're dealing with known equipment. They have extensive training and CRM training and currency training, proficiency procedures and currency and so on. And their escape procedures are built in under a letter of agreement to their database. So when they get a Jepson database, not like when we get a Jepson database, they get a special Jepson database that has their escape procedures built into it. They can call up in their database and say, I want to get out of town for departure procedure, and it has their escape procedure built in, which automatically resets their FMSs to the appropriate RMPs. But somebody is going to say to me, well, we have that 1% of FMSs that they do allow us to manually override the RMP. And I grant you, there are some aircraft that allow you to do that. The Falcon 7, I think, is one of those that I saw recently. But I've never found a pilot that actually knew how to do it. That's another issue.
Max, let's take a quick break from the takeoff performance discussion to talk about the performance of something else.
Your portfolio.
Your portfolio? Oh,
we're on the same page. Is your portfolio performing the way it should? What if there's an engine failure? Are you prepared for the backup plan?
Are you prepared for possible pullback in the market in the future?
Yeah, or after recording this, it's in the past, right?
Were you prepared for this kind of inflation?
That's right.
I'll tell you who was. Timothy T. Pope.
Who's that? Oh, when it comes to financial planning, Tim has got your back so you can focus on the mission ahead. Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner helping professional pilots design and execute smart financial planning strategies, from retirement planning and investment management to military transition and tax planning. He's your financial planning partner. Timothy P. Pope, CFP, helping professional pilots make the most out of life, even when they've only got one engine running. Check the show notes to get on Tim's calendar. All right, back to the discussion with Jim.
I'll tell you, Jim, at our airline, our FMSs do allow you to do that, and we actually do it regularly because we set the RMP value to 0.3 when we fly the RMP approaches now.
Right.
Or we set it even to 0.1, depending on what, because the thing is, there's different minimums based on what RMP, and, you know, depending on what the RAIM is, you may be able to fly it at 0.3, but not at 0.1 during a certain time frame or whatever. So actually, part of our procedures, we manually select it, but that's on our airline box. And also, to another thing you said, you know, ours on the airline side, our escape procedures, our single engine escape procedures are not programmed in the FMS. But what we do have are charts, whereas it's not just a textual description of like, okay, do this, this, and that. And obviously, we all fly into these airports with a lot of regularity and brief the same procedure all the time. So it is actually flyable. Like, you have confidence that it's flyable, and it has been tested, like you said, and everything else. And they're not overly complex. Some of them are more complex. You know, most of them is turn to this heading, or at this altitude turn here. Some of them are much more complex than that, but they're not unflyable. And the other thing too is that the more complex ones, it seems like you have some time before you have to do something in the event that an engine fails, like the other pilot could be like, okay, we're going to turn at this point to this heading, kind of rebrief you on it. But they seem realistic is my point.
Yeah. And when I was training in simulators, I can tell you this, it usually took a crew 3 attempts at one of these escape procedures before they got it down correctly. And if I moved them to a different escape procedure in the same airport, but a different procedure, it took them another 3 attempts. And if they come back in 6 months, it takes them another 3 attempts all over again. So that's in just the 135 environment. That's not in a 121 environment where they have actually, like you mentioned, very strict, standards. They have the ability to, and you're trained in how to change this RMP. But like I said, some people will say, I've got one of these airplanes where I can change the RMP. Now, problem is, and you had mentioned approaches where you can set the RMP of 0.3. And when you're in a situation where you get an RMP alert where the RMP is no longer 0.3, you're supposed to do what? Go missed.
You have to abandon the approach. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you go missed on a departure?
Yeah. Good point.
So this is a real challenge that I've been fighting, the FAA, for several years now.
Well, hold on, Jim. So you said you've been in discussions with the FAA. What does the FAA have to say about this?
I've approached them numerous times through different avenues. Most of the time, I've been ignored. I've sent emails that have gone unanswered for years. I was recently able to get a hold of the right person through an acquaintance of mine and got an audience. And they said to me, what you need to do is submit a written document that is essentially a SAFO of what you want us to look at. I created that document from my experiences through Gulfstream and so on. That document is actually on my website. It's under pilot points. It's called RMP versus runway analysis. The FAA took that document that I gave them, and instead of giving it to AFS 200 or whoever does these types of things, they sent it to NBAA. They sent it to a political organization, an advocacy program. I don't know why they sent it to the NBA, but what I got back was essentially 20 pages of absolute gaslighting and straw man arguments. They spent the entire time stating the philosophy that TERPS is an all-engine operating procedure and has nothing to do with one engine in op procedures. In my SAFO, I never even addressed climb gradient analysis, never talked about TERPS. It's not even mentioned in the article. All of the points that I brought up here were totally ignored. Now, what I heard, the FAA's response was, because these are third-party depart procedures and the industry doesn't want to touch it, we're not going to touch it. That's essentially how it was stated. But there is a glimmer of hope here. Last month, I received a notice 8900.664. It's titled Contractor Provided One Engine and Operative Airport Analysis, Obstacle Analysis. The audience is not the operators. It's not the pilots. It's not the 135 operators and so on. The audience is the POIs and the ASIs, and basically making them alert to the fact that there's a lot of operators out there using runway analysis without any authorization to do so, or they don't use a term rubber stamp, but I think that's what they're getting here. Authorization that was basically rubber stamped that says, yeah, you can use this procedure because it's kind of out there in the industry. It's just out, everyone uses it. There is the notice actually talks about you need to be alerting people, and they covered a number of areas that I've talked about here too. Specifically, they talk about how operators have different types of FMSs, and FMSs are configured differently in how you get into the systems. Some of them you can split the FMS. Sometimes you have to use a flight plan that's behind another flight plan. But what their point was in this notice was that there's no training, there's no CRM training, there's no criteria within even their op spec that they go through, that they look at these things. Now, I'm totally for this notice. It's a great first step, but there is a huge 80,000-pound gorilla in the room that they've completely ignored, and that's this RMP of one issue. You had mentioned that you have approaches that use an RMP of 0.1. Those are authorization required approaches. The authorization required approaches mean both the pilot and the aircraft are certified to fly that procedure. This is an AR authorization required departure procedure, and there's no authorization, no training, no oversight whatsoever. So I'm very happy that this notice came out. So again, it's 8900.664, and I've already been in contact with the FAA saying that's a great first step. Baby steps, I understand, but we need to address this whole point of aircraft certification as well.
Yeah, it would be pretty interesting if there's training mandated, because that's one of the most complex and challenging maneuvers you could perform in an airplane that you're a lot of times banking your life on. And so it would be interesting. It would seem prudent for them to have a training requirement for that in recurrent. And at the airlines, it's a little different because it's not the same footprint like it is in business aviation when we go to recurrent. But there certainly are instances where we do fly those and practice those single engine procedures, alternate procedures, and fly them. And it would seem if the guys at Gulfstream tested this and weren't able to fly them, if you introduced a training requirement and nobody could successfully fly them, that would be very eye-opening. But, it sounds like you're slowly bringing awareness to this subject, and we appreciate you spending the time and the effort to try and do that. And getting the FAA to make change is no easy task, that's for sure.
Right. When I had mentioned before that the runway analysis was originally airline specific, somebody got the bright idea of collecting all of these escape procedures and putting them in an app and then giving them to 135 or 91 operators like carte blanche, without any training, without any currency or proficiency requirements, without even any aircraft certification involved. Now, let me just kind of end with this anecdote. After this presentation where this chief pilot had mentioned that he wanted to know when runway analysis was going to be indoors, after that answer came about, they excused us for a coffee break. And I went out and got a cup of coffee, and I met a guy, and we got into conversation, and I asked him what type of airplane he flew, and he said a G550, to which I said, oh, that's interesting. That's exactly the airplane that they used to do that runway analysis testing. And I said, what would you think about that? And he says, doesn't matter. We're going to use runway analysis anyway. We've been using it for 2 years and never had a problem. I don't remember his answer, but I'm sure I asked him, I said, when's the last time you actually had an engine out failure where you actually used that procedure? He was pretty adamant that it doesn't matter what Gulfstream found, they're going to continue to do that. My hope is that the people listening to this podcast won't be like that person. I hope they'll take this information and digest it and test everything that I've said, make sure that I'm being truthful with you. Go ahead and check it out. All the information is on my website. Go in your own cockpits, try entering these procedures and see if you get an RMP of 1, see if you can override it. That's kind of the bottom line of this whole thing.
Yeah. And part of the reason we started this podcast, Jim, is to maybe bring awareness to things that people weren't necessarily thinking about that can promote safety and things. So we've always said, if you have the extra time in the simulator, when you're trying to figure out what to do, this is one of those things that you should give it a shot. Go somewhere you fly regularly, try and fly the alternate procedure and see how it goes and look at it and see if you're comfortable doing that, if your life depends on it, and you make the decision, because at this point, it's up to you as the pilot or the operator, because the rules give you a lot of latitude right now on what decision you want to make. All right. Well, Jim, your wealth and depth of knowledge in the performance arena is always impressive. And thanks for bringing awareness to these escape procedures, and practically utilizing them versus in theory are two very different things. So thanks again for coming on the show. Well, I think Jim brought to light there a couple of pretty eye-opening things about runway analysis and, some of the things that certainly aren't on the surface when you're using that. But takeoff performance continues to always be this mysterious thing, and we get numbers. Sometimes we don't know exactly where they come from, and let's be honest, a lot of us, I don't think know 100% what they all mean all the time or what they're guaranteeing you. But I think we've dug into this topic multiple times, and every time we do, I still learn something new.
Yeah. And I think, to be fair, we have reached out, and we're going to continue to reach out to folks in the runway analysis world. We'd love to have them come on the show and talk as well. And so hopefully we can get a little follow-up to this episode and get kind of their perspective. But I think if you kind of got lost in the discussion a little bit, here's what it boils down to. What RNP does a runway analysis departure require? And is your airplane capable of producing that RMP?
Well, or is it capable, and are you capable of selecting that level of RMP, even if it is capable?
Not even that, but can you get it? And then there's the errors. So even if the airplane thinks it's at where it's at, with the error built in,
Yeah, it's like flying an RMP approach on
exactly.
On an arrival since right. Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah. So I think that's really what it boils down to is, boy, even if you can execute this perfectly, is your airplane capable of showing you the correct path? So,
and I think what would be interesting too, we always talk about the extra time in the sim that we always find ourselves with, and that's where you are at a crossroads. You can either get to happy hour quicker and bail, or you can spend a little time and do something extra, right? And this is one of those things I think you should go in there, look back when you departed and you relied on an alternate takeoff procedure in the event of an engine failure, and that's how you got out of somewhere at the weight you were at, and then go in the sim, pop the motor and fly it, knowing you have it coming, and see if you could have flown it. I think that's the best way to bring reality to the forefront.
Sure. And you can add in all those other things, what was the sensitivity you have set for the alternate procedure? What's the error that the sim's giving you? Because it probably is, might be 0. So, there's a lot of factors, but I think Jim brings up a lot of good food for thought. So hopefully folks enjoyed that. Like I said, I think this conversation warrants definitely a conversation with some runway analysis folks. So if you know somebody that is involved in runway analysis, we'd love to chat with them. All right. Well, speaking of folks coming our way, Max, we've got some flight advice coming up. Always happy to try and help out. Our friends at Harvey Watt sponsor this segment of the show. You can visit harveywatt.com to see all of the insurance offerings that they provide professional pilots around the globe. They are the largest provider of loss of medical insurance for professional pilots. If you are an airline pilot and you have this coverage, chances are it is backed by Harvey Watt. But guess what? Every coverage from every airline is a little bit different because it all depends on what the company and the union negotiate. And there might be some gaps in your coverage. You can fill those gaps by talking to Harvey Watt directly. They'll tell you, oh, you're at Frontier, this is what you have, and maybe this is what we recommend supplementing it with. Oh, you're at Delta, you guys have this, maybe this is something you can add. You can tailor make it for your family situation, your career situation, and your phase of life. Visit harveywatt.com. Okay, Max, I'm going to steal this one from our friends over at propilotworld.com. Someone wrote in just a couple of days ago on PPW asking for some advice from folks. And I thought, we could tackle this one. Be kind of useful. I think this topic would be good. It says Southwest CJO versus Part 91 CJO conditional job offer is what that stands for. As the saying goes, when it rains, it pours. Have two great opportunities. I'm torn which one to take. One is flying a nice Gulfstream out of the Northeast, and the other is at Southwest. Southwest has a lot of positives that include set schedule with real days off, 15% retirement contribution, live-in base, and some strong long-term career earning potential. I am a little unsure about how things will play out at Southwest due to contract talks, but I'm sure that will be resolved. The Gulfstream job is a Part 91 for a large corporation, has great pay, $300K a year. However, no set days off per month. Average flying days are 10 to 12 per month, with about 3 to 5 overnights and flying about 275 hours per year. 80% of the flying is domestic and 20% international. There is loss of license insurance. However, retirement is a 401k with a small match. I guess I'm torn because I think I would enjoy the Part 91 flying more, and $300K is a lot of money to turn down. However, I'm worried about the lack of schedule. Quality of life is important to me, and long-term career stability of corporate flying. Up until this point, I have only flown at the regionals, no Part 91 or 135 experience. Lots of smart people on this board with tons of experience doing both. Any advice? We greatly appreciate it.
Well, I left a Part 91 well-paying Gulfstream job to come to Southwest, so I guess I can speak to that.
For the schedule.
Yeah, for the schedule. So we'll start with the low-hanging fruit. Yes, the long-term career earnings potential is very good, and it's going to get better because we are renegotiating a contract and the industry has moved upward quite a bit. So there's no question of that. He mentions a 15% retirement company contribution. That's also going up by 2-3%, depending where you look, but that's going up as well. And the other big thing that, speaking as somebody now in their early 40s, that starts to become very important is disability. Because you read about these horror stories of people losing their medical, and not just loss of license, but there's also short-term and long-term disability that's on top of that at the airlines. And that can be life-changing. Cruising around your Part 91 corporate job, and almost everybody that loses their medical has no idea they're going to lose their medical. And it happens to people young or old. And that's a big thing, is a big risk as a pilot, is that's your livelihood. And you would definitely have a lot more security at the airlines from that. But the biggest thing for me was the schedule. And when you have no set days off, that means you have to move your life around your work schedule. That's just the way it is. That holds true for corporate flying. There's so many different scenarios out there, but it sounds like that's what he's saying. There's no set days off, which means you don't have a choice, which means you move your personal life around flying. And anyone who's been a corporate pilot, the only way to ensure you're going to fly is to plan something.
Yeah.
On days that you currently have off.
Yeah.
Concert tickets, anything. And the big paradigm shift that happened in my life was that I went from planning my entire life around my work schedule to planning my entire life. And I filled my work schedule in the gaps in there. Like, obviously I have to work, right? You have to leave time where you can work, but I've been able to successfully, most of the time, it's not all the time, let's be realistic, but most of the time I can move my work schedule around my life. And that has been a game changer for me. So it sounds like he's very concerned about that. And that's what makes this job not as much fun as Part 91 corporate flying. Going to hotels for 15-hour overnights with no rental car and no company card is not as much fun. I will tell you that. Flying my one leg to Turks and Caicos for a week and having a good old time. But there are certainly trade-offs, and you will fly more, and it is more of a grind. But I feel like you're compensated for that, not only monetarily, but also in other ways.
Yeah, flexibility.
With the flexibility and also the security. Like you said, Part 91, you never know what's going to happen. And the same holds true for the airlines. Things are great now, but airlines have furloughed and will furlough again. And as we saw from COVID, Southwest may not be immune to that like everybody thought for all of these years. Speaking from a guy who got a warn letter, there's no guarantees in this business anywhere you go. I don't know. What do you think?
My personal, because, I think many of us have evaluated this. At 10 to 12 days a month being gone with not much control over the schedule, I think that's a little bit too close because you're almost going to be working as much as you are at the airline at that point. My biggest argument to stay in business aviation is if you can find a good Part 91 job with a solid schedule where you're working about 6 to 8 days a month, then I think that's kind of, to me, where that break even is like, okay, if I'm going to be working less than the airlines where you're pretty much locked in at, what did it say, probably about 14, right?
I'm working next month. I will tell you, like, an actual case study. I'm working 13 days next month.
13, yeah. Yeah, 13. So I'd say it's probably realistic to think it's 12 to 14 a month, I think is probably pretty realistic. So if you can work a job where it's significantly less than that, and maybe you do have some control of the schedule, and like, oh, okay, then the time off may be worth more than the money. But
well, the other thing too, if he's making $300,000, you will be taking a substantial pay cut for a period of time.
Yep.
And it's not going to be all roses.
Well, he's coming from the regionals. This day and age at the regionals, he might be taking.
I know. I thought you were joking.
Remember the Southwest or the SkyWest check airman that was making 40 G's a month?
Yeah.
He wrote in. Yeah. I guess anything's possible. But anyways, yeah. The other thing is too, it doesn't sound like this person has any 91 or 135 experience. I got to tell you, unless you know someone at this job, this isn't adding up to me. To get a Gulfstream job offer for Part 91 at $300K with no 91 or 135 experience.
He says it's the Northeast. Maybe it's Teterboro.
Could be. Like, my guess is there's a reason there's a job vacancy there. Just going to say that.
Yeah, that's a good point. With airlines, you can read the contract. Like, the rules are public. But yeah, with corporate, I think it really takes firsthand knowledge. And a lot of guys, too, in business aviation, I've noticed, have a tendency to put spin on things, too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
everybody
a lot
does.
Of times in the presentation, too. So be a little skeptical, even if you have somebody that has firsthand knowledge of the spin factor, as they say.
So do you know someone at this flight department? Can you really get the details? That would be where I'd be investigating. But if you don't know the Part 91, 135 world at all, that's a leap. Now, with that being said, you could go try it for a year and see if you like it, and then hope that Southwest is still hiring and go back. But
that might cost you,
Yeah, that's going to cost you seniority. So if it was me, I'd probably say do the 121 thing.
Coming from a Part 91 corporate pilot, folks, you heard it here first. He has recommended the 121 route.
Oh, wait, where's your Northeast base for Southwest, though?
Baltimore.
Ooh.
Yeah, listen, dude, he lives in the Northeast. He must like it.
You better be driving distance to Baltimore. That's the only caveat.
Yeah, listen, you can move to Nashville now.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. New base.
New base. All right. Well, that is going to do it for unsolicited flight advice. You did not ask for that advice, but we saw it.
Yeah. Are you going to reply on the forum, say C215 show, episode whatever?
I will. That is on ProPilot World. If you're not on ProPilot World, you should be propilotworld.com. Check it out. Great message board, especially if you're in business aviation. We are not paid to say that, but... All right, that is going to do it for episode 105. Thank you so much for everyone that contributed to this show, including all of our listeners for reviews and emails. Jim Deuvall for his insight in takeoff performance, and our sponsors, Advanced Aircrew Academy, Harvey Watt, Tim Pope, various jet sales in the AirComp Calculator. Much appreciated, all that support. Max, I wish you good luck on your deadhead tonight. I hope you get some rest.
Thank you.
And
I intend to. Little nap on the flight up, a zip fizz before I get up in the cockpit.
Smart.
I think I can persevere for my one leg today.
You got it. If not, just write yourself a doctor's note. Put that in the flight bag. Now that you're carrying 3 bags, you should have room for the doctor's note.
Yeah, that's the sad part. I have no room. Still.
All right. Well, until next time, folks, remember,
flexibility is the key to air power. We'll see you next time.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.